It's been a long time coming, but let's talk about Luigi. What are you, Joe Biden?
Looking for my mark.
Oh. So, David the Marine. Let's start with the first thing everybody's talking about. He was using a weapon with a suppressor
That kept jamming.
When you add a suppressor to a pistol, sometimes there are side effects.
Lee, what about your ear protection?
We don't need ear protection.
Ah.
This is my 45 ACP with a suppressor. And the reason the second shot didn't go off is because of that.
So that's why we saw the guy
Re-racking his slide.
and a live round gets ejected and he shoots the next one.
Many times when you add a suppressor to a regular pistol and you don't make an alteration to the spring, what is happening is the power that's coming out of the barrel is diffused in the suppressor. So it doesn't rack the slide back far enough to bring it home again to reload.
So what you're saying is a gun that's reliable without a suppressor could become unreliable with a suppressor.
And he evidently knew this because he was prepared to re-rack that slide each time and hammer it home to make sure it was ready to fire.
Instead of fixing it, he did the remedial action required to do it. So that tells me he went out and practiced with this gun, with his setup, and but he had to do that, make sure it worked for the next shot. That's why his shots were so far apart. That's why it took so long for him to get those shots fired.
Yep.
The other thing we heard a lot about was the so-called ghost gun. I've seen 3 references to it in the media. 1, that it is a gun that was printed in a 3D printer. 2, that it's a gun that was illegally purchased and put together. 3, that it was put together with parts that weren't necessarily calling it a firearm and then putting it together. So I've heard all these descriptions of what a ghost gun is.
It started out to be identified as what they call a firearm frame that is 80% complete. It's not a firearm by legal definition until it surpasses 80% completion. So a company called Polymer 80 came up with a frame, this one for the Glock, that is 80% complete, not requiring a background check, not requiring a serial number, none of that. You get it and you finish the last 20% on your own, which is entirely legal as long as you don't sell the gun. So I think he had a version of the Polymer 80 or possibly a 3D printed version of the Polymer 80. This was assembled by parts. The frame was completed at last 20%. They're not the most reliable way to go. If you wanted a reliable gun, I would not go with the Polymer 80. The metal, you got to have these metal rails for that slide to work against, to ride upon. The current technology with plastics and stuff, it's not going to hold up against the forces of a slide coming back like that. That's why these pins are here to hold these steel rails in place. If the guy 3D printed it, he had to get the steel rails to put inside. To put in it, and he had the pins are visible in that one picture they have out so far. The pins are visible, so they're holding something. So where did he get the steel rails if it was a 3D printed frame? If you got the Polymer 80, of course, it came with it.
And there's an old adage among gun guys, if you like your eyes and your face, you don't want to shoot a ghost gun.
Much less a 3D printed suppressor.
Which is another thing they said he was shooting. Yeah.
Don't know much about the suppressor. I suspect that if it was a brand name suppressor, they'd be plastering that brand name all over the place and try and shoot down, pardon the pun, any efforts to deregulate suppressors, because there is a bill being bandied about that would do exactly that. This case is going to hinder that significantly, I suspect.
But what would you do or should you do if you are on the receiving end of what happened? Keep in mind, you can't have guns in New York City. So let's pretend, first of all, I am the CEO making $10 million plus a year. This is our bad guy lurking in the shadows. And I'm about to go into the hotel to testify against Nancy Pelosi.
Look out, Lee! Got it.
You can hire your own security.
Or if I'm making $10 million a year, but I have death threats for, I don't know, upcoming testimony or whatever, and I don't want to hire private security, which I don't know why I wouldn't do that. But I would think with $10 million, I could maybe get a permit to carry. But that gives him the first shot. So he hits, I turn, and now he's down, and I'm just injured.
And because he was messing with his slide, trying to reload his gun, you'd have had time to get that shot off.
Right, and I might point out that my gun did not jam. And even if I can't get the permission to carry a gun in New York City, I'd rather deal with the consequences afterwards instead of being the dead guy in the video.
I mean, this once again underscores what we say again and again and again, and that is that the bad guy with the gun did more damage than a good guy with a gun would have done.
Always carry a gun.
And as always,
Guns for everybody, including CEOs.